Welcome to our deep dive into the Russian Revolution.
Oh, exciting.
Today we're exploring excerpts from Robert Service's book, The Russian Revolution, 1900-1927. It's going to be a wild ride.
Okay.
From the early 1900s all the way through 1917.
Wow.
And then the chaotic aftermath.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. This event happened over a century ago.
I know.
Why does it still fascinate us so much?
It's a great question.
What's so relevant about it even now?
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the Russian Revolution shows us
Yeah.
how even the strongest power structures can fall apart.
Yeah.
It's a story of hope and despair and people just wanting a better world.
Yeah.
It's something we can all relate to even today.
Okay, let's take it back.
Yeah.
Back to the beginning.
Right.
Russia at the turn of the 20th century.
Oh, wow.
Service describes it as a land of contrasts.
Okay.
Huge empire with a powerful monarchy, but also lots of poverty and unrest.
Oh, I see.
The Romanov dynasty, wow. Yeah.
They've been in power for centuries,
Right.
but their control was starting to slip.
Interesting.
Tsar Nicholas II.
Yeah.
He had absolute authority. Most Russians had no say in politics.
Right.
Censorship everywhere. Dissent was crushed.
Sounds oppressive.
It was. But here's something interesting this service points out.
Okay.
Despite Russia being seen as this police state,
Right.
they had way fewer policemen per person compared to, say, the UK.
Oh, really?
It's kind of strange, right?
Yeah. That is surprising.
So how did they maintain control?
Well, they used other methods. Like, think about it. Military garrisons all over the empire, a huge network of informers spying on people.
Wow.
And Russia itself was just so vast,
Yeah.
especially the rural areas, it made close surveillance really hard.
So a system built on fear and limited resources.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Yeah.
Russia's going through this rapid industrialization.
Okay.
Now, that brought economic growth, sure.
But it also created a massive gap between the rich and the poor.
Ah, the classic divide.
Exactly. Factory workers had terrible conditions,
I know.
very few rights. And the peasants,
Yeah.
well, despite some reforms,
Okay.
they were stuck in this outdated system.
Stuck in the past.
This inequality,
Yeah.
it fueled so much resentment
Oh, I bet.
and created this breeding ground for revolutionary ideas.
Makes sense.
There's this satirical cartoon from the time that Service includes.
Oh, I love those.
It shows the power structure in Imperial Russia,
Okay.
and it has these captions like,
Like what?
they dispose of our money.
Oh, wow.
They prey on our behalf. They eat on our behalf.
Jeez.
They shoot at us.
Ew.
And finally, we labor for them while they.
Wow, that's powerful.
It really captures the anger,
Yeah.
the frustration that ordinary Russians felt,
Right.
this gap between the elite and everyone else.
It's the pressure was building.
It was like something had to give. But what was the spark
Yeah. What lit the fuse?
that finally ignited the revolution?
Good question. World War I.
Ah, World War I.
Russia's involvement was a disaster.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It revealed how incompetent the Tsarist regime really was, made the economic problems much worse.
Right.
And don't forget the devastating losses on the battlefield.
So many lives lost.
People were just exhausted,
Yeah.
tired of the war, hungry, and completely disillusioned with the government.
It's like all the problems just
Yeah.
got amplified.
Yeah, sure.
Service makes it very clear
Yep.
that World War I was the breaking point.
The final straw.
Exactly.
And that brings us to
Yeah.
the February Revolution in 1917.
What a year.
It changed everything for Russia.
It all started with bread riots
Oh, why?
and strikes in Petrograd.
The capital city.
Right, and then things just spiraled out of control.
You can imagine the chaos.
Tsar Nicholas
Yeah.
II,
Yeah.
he was forced to abdicate.
Wow, centuries of Romanov rule.
Just gone.
What a shock.
What was the reaction like?
I mean, it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Some people were thrilled, of course.
Celebrating the end of the Tsar.
Right.
But it also created a power vacuum
Mm,
and a lot of uncertainty about the future.
that's understandable.
So what happened next?
Well, what emerged was this
Yeah.
kind of strange situation we call dual power.
Dual power.
Yeah, you had the Provisional Government,
Okay.
mostly liberals. They wanted a more democratic system.
All right.
But then you also had Petrograd Soviet.
As a Soviet.
Yeah, a council of workers and soldiers.
Oh, wow.
They were pushing for more radical changes.
Two completely different visions
So-
for Russia's future.
Right.
How did they even function together?
Well, it was a fragile balance.
Yeah,
And the tensions were very high.
I bet. The Provisional Government had their work cut out for them.
For
They had to keep the war effort going.
Right.
deal with the economic mess.
And a population demanding change.
Yeah. Enter the Bolsheviks.
Led by Lenin,
Vladimir Lenin.
a brilliant strategist
Uh-huh.
and a true believer in Marxist ideology.
He saw this chaos as an opportunity to seize power and create a socialist state.
And their slogan, peace, land, and bread,
Oh, yeah, that was brilliant.
resonated so deeply.
Put yourself in the shoes of a soldier,
Okay.
stuck in the trenches,
Yeah.
exhausted, hungry, and disillusioned.
Feeling hopeless.
And then you hear this promise of peace,
Right.
land, and food.
Must have seemed like a dream.
It was a powerful message,
Oh, yeah.
especially compared to what the Provisional Government was offering.
They seemed weak and indecisive.
Right, the Bolsheviks looked like the true champions of the people.
And their popularity just exploded.
And then came October 1917,
The October Revolution.
a carefully planned coup.
They took over key government buildings
Oh.
and communication centers in Petrograd.
It happened so fast.
It was a turning point in Russian history.
It's incredible how this relatively small party
Yeah.
managed to overthrow the government
Amazing.
and create this whole new Soviet state.
It really makes you think.
How did they pull it off?
Well, we talked about their message.
Right, peace, land, and bread.
It resonated with the masses.
People were desperate for change.
But they were also incredibly well organized. Their propaganda was effective,
Right.
and they knew how to exploit their opponent's weaknesses.
So a combination of popular support, clever tactics, and maybe a bit of luck.
Or perhaps.
But taking power was just the first step.
Oh, the hard part was just beginning.
They had to build a new order.
From the ashes of the old.
Russia was in chaos.
It was.
The economy was a disaster, and opposition to the Bolsheviks was growing.
Both inside and outside of Russia.
This was the start of the Russian Civil War.
A brutal, devastating conflict.
The Bolsheviks, now called the Reds
Yeah.
against the Whites.
The anti-Bolshevik forces.
Years of fighting, millions of lives lost.
Service describes some horrific scenes.
It's hard to imagine this suffering.
Families torn apart. Cities ravaged by famine and disease.
And the brutality.
It left deep scars on the Russian people.
To survive this war,
Yeah.
the Bolsheviks implemented something called War Communism.
It was a radical policy.
It sounds harsh.
It was.
They basically took control of everything.
Nationalized industries, forced peasants to give up their grain.
Wow.
Anyone who spoke out against them was silenced.
So they were trying to mobilize all resources for the war effort.
That was the goal.
But what about the people?
It was incredibly tough.
I imagine so.
Imagine you're a peasant family,
Okay.
barely surviving.
Yeah.
Your crops are taken away.
Leaving nothing for your children
Black markets started popping up.
to get basic necessities.
But if you were caught,
Yeah.
the punishment was severe.
It was a time of extreme hardship.
Absolutely.
So war communism might have helped them win the war,
It did help them win.
but it also destroyed the economy.
And created a lot of resentment.
By 1921, the Civil War was winding down.
Right.
The Bolsheviks realized they needed a new approach.
The country was in ruins.
They had to revive the economy,
And somehow appease the people.
and that's where the new economic policy comes in.
The NEP.
It was a big shift from war communism.
Much less centralized control.
They allowed some private enterprise,
Right.
encouraged foreign investment.
And most importantly,
Yeah,
they stopped forcing peasants to give up their grain,
okay.
replaced it with a food tax.
So peasants could sell their surplus. It
Exactly.
was a pragmatic move.
It was.
What was the reaction?
Well, it brought some stability back.
Okay,
The economy started to recover.
that's good.
Peasants had more incentive to produce.
Right.
And this new market economy started to emerge.
But it also caused some tension within the Bolshevik Party.
Oh, yeah.
What were they arguing about?
Some saw it as a betrayal of their socialist principles.
A step backwards.
Yeah, a necessary evil. Others thought it was the right way to go.
A more gradual transition to socialism.
Right.
They knew they had to be pragmatic.
To rebuild the country.
So even though they won the Civil War, the future of the Soviet Union was still up in the air.
It was a constant struggle.
So much change, even after the Bolsheviks won.
Right. The NEP was a fascinating time.
So
The
complex.
Bolsheviks had so much to figure out.
Trying to govern and rebuild.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what if they had kept those hardline communist policies?
Instead of the NEP.
Would they have stayed in power?
Who knows?
Or would the compromises they made,
With the NEP.
would that have led to a completely different Soviet Union?
It's hard to say.
So many possibilities.
Service rights.
Oh, yeah.
The chances of the makers of the October Revolution moving along a route of peaceful, steady development were never great.
They faced an uphill battle from the start.
Their ideology, their past,
The situation they inherited,
it all pointed towards a difficult road ahead.
they were revolutionaries.
Not exactly known for stability.
They wanted this classless, equal society.
But the reality?
It was a country devastated by war.
Struggling to recover.
A tough situation all around.
So looking back now,
Yeah.
why does this matter to us?
What can we learn from it?
It happened so long ago.
The Russian Revolution, for all its ups and downs.
Right.
It teaches us so much about power, revolution, and how societies change.
It shows how revolutions can start with good intentions.
Yeah, noble goals.
But the consequence...
They can be unpredictable.
And far-reaching.
Definitely.
It's a cautionary tale.
But also a story of resilience.
And incredible change.
Absolutely.
I keep thinking about the people who lived through it.
The everyday Russians.
Caught in the middle of this historical whirlwind.
Their hopes, their fears.
What did they dream of?
It's the human side of this story that gets me.
Yeah.
Beyond the politics and ideologies.
The individual lives.
Millions of them.
Affected by these events.
Imagine being a peasant.
Okay.
Finally given land.
After centuries of wanting it.
And then it's taken away again.
Under war communism.
Or a factory worker.
Trying to survive in all that chaos.
Economic turmoil.
Political uncertainty.
It's a reminder.
Of what?
That history isn't just dates and names.
Yeah.
It's people's stories.
So many stories.
Each one important.
By understanding those stories.
You'll get a better sense of the past.
And how it shapes us today.
Exactly.
We've come a long way from discontent in Tsarist Russia.
To 1917, the year that changed everything.
And then the aftermath.
Trying to build something new.
You've talked about the major players.
Lenin, the Tsar.
The key events.
The revolutions, wars.
And what it all means.
The legacy of the Russian Revolution.
But most importantly,
we've explored the human side of it all.
The people who lived it.
Their stories are what make history come alive.
As we wrap up our deep dive today, I want you to imagine something.
Okay.
Go back to Russia in 1917.
Wow. 1917.
What do you see?
I see so much change happening.
What do you hear?
The sounds of revolution.
What do you feel?
Hope, fear, uncertainty.
And knowing what you know now.
About how things turned out.
What choices would you make?
That's a tough question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Russian Revolution.
It's been a fascinating journey.